Since 1978-79, there have been links between the two sides, the exiled Tibetans led by the Dalai Lama and the Chinese government. But they've gone in spurts. There was a period of 5 years when they had some meetings in the 80s. There were a couple of meetings in the 90s, and then they started again meeting in 2002. And they've had 9 or 10 meetings since 2002. But each time these meetings essentially have broken down over numerous issues, in which basically the Tibetans say they want to talk about Tibet, and that they want to define Tibet as all the Tibetan areas under China. And they say they want to have a different political arrangement there, some kind of autonomy under China, but with much greater local decision making. And the Chinese have conversely said that they're only interested in talking about the Dalai Lama himself and him returning to China, and that they don't feel any need to talk about the wider issues. So there's a big gap between these two sides. We have a negotiating system in which trust is not really being built up. In fact, it's really an antagonistic relationship, particularly, I would say, from the Chinese side. But behind the scenes, there are people like myself who think there are possible signs of more discussion in China. There are possible signs of some leaders, maybe not at the very top, but not far from the top, who think that this talks process should be encouraged. So we don't see any real progress yet, but it's not to be ruled out. China only sees the western part of the plateau as a place called Tibet, the part that was directly ruled by the Dalai Lama's government in Lhasa when China took over in 1950-51. So in that western area of Tibet that they call the Tibet Autonomous Region, since 2008, conditions have been remarkably restrictive, very, very tight indeed. They're in Lhasa, the capital of the Tibet Autonomous Region. There are troops on every corner of the Tibetan area of the town. There's a vast amount of rebuilding, probably a lot of Chinese migrants moving in. Very, very little space for people to express opinions. Very great restrictions on religion. Students in the university not allowed to practice religion, I think, if they're Tibetans, and if they're Buddhist. Government officials and their family members probably still not allowed to practice religion, as far as we know. We should remember that Tibetans are very resilient. They're very used to living under these kind of controls, and they continue their normal lives as much as they can. As long as they keep out of politics, and as long as they're not monks and nuns, they'll probably be able to continue normal life. They can't, of course, be reading Western literature or tuning into speeches by the Dalai Lama on their television screens. So life continues, and we do see, especially in Eastern Tibet, important intellectual revival in writing and poetry and so on. That's been going on for some years. We see filmmakers and fine artists producing good work. So we shouldn't imagine that the political controls completely destroy people's ability to express themselves. It destroys subjects they can touch on. They can't talk about a lot of issues, but we see still a lot of cultural life and a cultural dynamism inside Tibet, especially eastern areas. The IATS has come to be particularly significant in the last 30 years because the Chinese government has also decided that it's important. That means that they decided roughly from the early 90s to allow members of the scholarly community inside Tibet and China to attend IATS conferences, actually in significant numbers. That means that we're not just a meeting of people outside Tibet and China talking amongst ourselves. We're a seminar which we hear from people who are inside China, inside Tibet, as well as them hearing what international foreign scholars think.